Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, of course, I thought that I would give my prediction on the decent fight that is going to be happening this weekend. I don't remember if this plays on DAZN or maybe Showtime. I don't necessarily remember. If I had to guess, I believe that this plays on DAZN. But, anyways, of course, for those of you that did not know, Mr. Ryan Garcia, who of course is one of the bigger up and coming stars of the sport of boxing, he is finally facing a fighter that somewhat is at least a little bit of a challenge. And this fighter's name, of course, is by the name of Javier Fortuna. And Javier Fortuna, for those of you that really don't remember him, Javier Fortuna, I believe, used to be an undefeated fighter. They used to show him on PBC all the time. I believe that he's a fighter from that of the Dominican Republic. I never thought that Javier Fortuna, in my view, was ever really an A grade fighter. I never really thought that he had the best of skill sets. I always thought that even though he had a little bit of boxing ability and he does have decent athleticism, I always thought that he was a little bit too sloppy for his own good. And I always thought that he would get into a little bit too many wars for his own good. And this is really going to be a very big measuring test of where Ryan Garcia is in his career, if he can even get past that of a Javier Fortuna. Now, of course, Ryan Garcia, in my view, he probably is more talented than that of a Javier Fortuna, but Ryan Garcia, it has been a slow process overall in building him up as a fighter. And it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. And it's also going to be very interesting because, of course, for those of you that know what has happened as of recent, of course, he left the Eddie Reynoso gym in Team Canelo Alvarez, and he went up to sign with Mr. Joe Goosen, who, of course, I think is a decent, excuse me, who is a decent coach overall, who trains his fighters somewhat decently well. Of course, the last time that we seen Joe Goosen train a fighter that actually, was an underdog overall and actually gave a decent fight. That was Chris Arreola against that of Andrew Weese, and he actually somewhat surprisingly put up a very decent fight. Will Ryan Garcia improve under Joe Goosen's mentorship? Perhaps. We'll see. Now, of course, his last fight against, I believe, that one African fighter, Emmanuel Tago, of course, pretty much a no-name fighter. Ryan Garcia, of course, to a lot of people, he did not look very impressive because he really did not get the stoppage over a no-name fighter, a fighter that I don't believe really had any power whatsoever, and a fighter that was pretty much a no-name, and that's understandable. But I'll give Ryan Garcia a little bit of a break, and the reason why that is because I don't necessarily find him to be on the Vasily Lomachenko or Javante Tank Davis or Devin Haney level, or basically what am I saying? The high A grade talents of the division, at least quite as of yet. I do believe that Ryan Garcia is very decently talented, especially physically and athletically. But I do think that he is going to have to work on some things if he is going to be a champion or a successful champion over the history and over these, next few years. So it's going to be very particularly interesting. But Ryan Garcia in his last fight, I thought that basically what he was doing was his was his best Canelo Alvarez impression. He basically was keeping his hands up the whole entire time, coming forward, trying to counter him, trying to get in 1-2 punch shots. Basically, it reminded me a lot of how Canelo Alvarez usually fights at this current moment in time in his career. This fight is going to be very particularly interesting. And the reason why that is because Javier Fortuna, for fighters that have not prepared against him very well, or fighters that have proved to be lesser than not A grade fighters, at least for the regular weight divisions that he's been in, he has proved to be a little bit of a tough opponent. He gave Adrian Granados a very tough fight. He gave Robert Easter a very tough fight. He even gave Jojo Diaz recently a very tough fight, who of course ended up defeating him. But overall, when it comes down to it, Ryan Garcia is going to have to be careful in this fight. He is going to have to watch out for Javier Fortuna. He is going to try to land some major blows in this fight, and it is going to be very particularly interesting. Anyways, when it comes down to it, what is my fight prediction for this fight? Who do I believe is going to win this fight? I do personally have Ryan Garcia winning this fight. I'm going to predict that Ryan Garcia wins this fight by stoppage because I believe that he is going to turn this fight up a little bit more than what he did in his last fight. Not only was Ryan Garcia, I believe, coming off of a right hand surgery, but on top of that, with Mr. Joe Goosen, it does take a little bit of time to kind of get used to overall a new coach's trainings because basically what they're going to try to do is to break you down completely as a fighter and somewhat change your style. So I'm sure all in all, Joe Goosen basically said, this is the way we do things around here, and overall, you're going to have to get adjusted to my type of style. So, it is what it is. So this is going to be very interesting, but I believe that Ryan Garcia, in my opinion, I believe that his height, I believe that his size and his reach will prove overall to be a very good tool, or to prove to be very good tools against that Javier Fortuna. I believe that if this ends up being a war, that Javier Fortuna, even though he does have a decent punch, I don't know if he has quite enough of a punch really to knock out Ryan Garcia, unless Ryan Garcia, when it comes down to it, unless he just gets hit so repeatedly. But I doubt that that's going to happen in this fight. Ryan Garcia, in my opinion, he has looked slightly more impressive as the fights have went along. Now, of course, they have not been against A-grade caliber competition, but they have been improvements nonetheless. And Javier Fortuna, even though I think that, he does have a little bit of a punch and he is a person that actually has a little bit more boxing ability than maybe what some people give him credit for, he is not an A-grade level boxer. And he will give you a lot of opportunities, especially because he likes to get in some exchanges that he probably should not want to get into. He overall tries to get in certain wars, and overall he gets hit a little bit more than what you'd be comfortable with. So Ryan Garcia is going to have opportunities in this fight to hit up on Javier Fortuna. He is overall going to have opportunities to out-counter him. He is going to have opportunities because Javier Fortuna, more than likely in this fight, there is going to be a multitude of times where Javier Fortuna tries to make Ryan Garcia comfortable on the inside. And that is what Ryan Garcia, in my view, should take advantage of. Not only use your jab, but when he tries to come on the inside and when he tries to possibly rough you up, back up or hit him overall at an angle, try to go to the body and hit maybe a few punch combinations. And with Ryan Garcia's power, he is more than likely going to be able to back up that Javier Fortuna. Javier Fortuna, once again, he is a decent fighter, but he is not a great fighter. And that's why this is such a great matchup for Mr. Ryan Garcia. Because Javier Fortuna, I believe, is a former champion. He's not an A-grade champion. He never has been an A-grade champion. But for Ryan Garcia, this is a B-grade fight. But this is a fight that he needs because Javier Fortuna is very highly experienced. He's a person that does pack a little bit of a punch. He has decent athleticism. He can box a little bit on the back foot overall, and he can pressure you when he wants to. The problem with Javier Fortuna and his main downfall is just that he gets way too sloppy, and overall he gets in way too many wars without defending himself properly overall for his own good, and that's eventually why he ends up losing pretty much the bigger fights in his career. But it just is what it is. But Ryan Garcia is going to have plenty of opportunities, more than likely, to beat that Javier Fortuna. Now, is it possible maybe that Javier Fortuna will take more of a defensive approach and maybe that he'll try to be on the back foot and run Ryan Garcia into shots? It is very possible. I've seen Javier Fortuna do that in certain fights. I believe I've seen him do that at times against that not Robert. What the hell was that one dude's name from Ohio? Robert Easter. There we go, Robert Easter. I seen him do it against Robert Easter. I seen him do it against, I believe, Adrian Granados. So Ryan Garcia, if he is on the back foot, that of Mr. Javier Fortuna I'm talking about, he's going to have to be very careful that he does not run into shots because Javier Fortuna, he loves to counter you, especially with his good overhand left when it comes down to it, and then he'll try to get on the inside and he'll try to rough you up. He may tie you up a little bit. He will more than likely go on the inside. So Ryan Garcia is going to be tested in this fight pretty much all around, and it's a very good matchup for him because, once again, Javier Fortuna, he is not someone like a Gervonta Tank Davis, but he is someone that is going to test you on both ends, especially when you're a little bit inexperienced and when you're an up-and-coming champion, or a fighter that is very decently talented. So Ryan Garcia is going to be tested to the full of his ability this Saturday, and I am very decently excited for this fight. But why do I believe Ryan Garcia will win this fight? I believe that he's pretty much more talented than Javier Fortuna in almost every single way. I believe that he's a little bit better defensively than Javier Fortuna, even though, of course, he does have holes in his defense. He can be hit. I believe that he has more power, and I believe more than likely that will affect Javier Fortuna, possibly even back him up and overall possibly limit overall his punch output. Because once again, Javier Fortuna, he does not have an A-grade defense overall. And if you punch him, I believe that you can possibly get to him a little bit. He may overall try to outdo you, but I think that if Ryan Garcia shows off his power early, and I think that if he hits him, more than likely it will limit Javier Fortuna's output. Because fighters, even though certain fighters who get into wars, when they start getting hit with that type of power, especially against a fighter that is decently more defensive than them or a fighter that is less harder to hit than them, and they keep getting hit by those good power shots, they are eventually going to back up. They are eventually going to limit their punch output because they realize that if they don't, they're eventually going to get stopped. So it's going to be very particularly interesting. I could see this fight going any way, but I do believe Ryan Garcia has to be the favorite here. If Javier Fortuna ended up pulling off the upset, would I be 100% shell shocked? I wouldn't be shell shocked. It wouldn't be the biggest upset that I've seen in boxing history, but I would be a little bit surprised. I expect Ryan Garcia to beat Javier Fortuna. I believe more than likely that he will stop him because I believe Ryan Garcia is going to try to put on the pressure, and I believe all in all that he will be more adjusted to Joe Goossen's style, but we will see all in all what ends up happening here. But anyways, this should be a very good, entertaining fight. For however long it lasts. If it does last the full 12, we'll see overall what ends up happening, but it should be very, very particularly interesting. Anyways, we will see what happens with Mr. Ryan Garcia. I do predict him to win this fight either by knockout within about 7 to 10 rounds or more than likely by unanimous decision. Would not be surprised if it was a split decision, but I have Ryan Garcia winning this fight. And after this fight, especially if Ryan Garcia does look impressive, but even if he doesn't look impressive, he is going to continue to have to going into the ring, or he is going to have to go into the ring with some decent top contenders. And now I'm not even talking about Vasily Lomachenko, Gervonta Tank Davis, Devin Haney. I'm not even talking about any of those guys. I'm talking about fighters like Jojo Diaz and Isaac Pitbull Cruz. If Ryan Garcia ends up getting past Javier Fortuna, and if he is not interested in any of those big fights next, he is going to have to face one of those guys, in my opinion. Not only to sharpen his skill set, but to probably get the media off of him. So we'll see what happens. Because Ryan Garcia, one thing I'll say about this, even though I think the kid is very, somewhat physically talented, he sure talks a hell of a lot of shit for not really even winning one belt in his career at this current moment in time. And I'm talking about an official belt. I don't count the interim. I don't count the regulars. I don't count the intercontinental. To me, those are not real belts. Okay? So it is what it is. But anyways, we'll see what happens with Mr. Ryan Garcia. Should be very interesting. But that's about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.